Black Friday drastically changed the poker industry forever.
I mean, Black Friday was like the saddest day of my life.
The day that we now know as Black Friday.
A lot of it was completely out of my control in terms of I couldn't have prevented it.
Poker in America in the 2000s. The game was on fire. Coming off Chris Moneymaker's historic main event win, online poker flourished and looked like it might never slow down, with players from all walks of life gathering to test their skills and luck. The excitement was palpable and the community was booming. It seemed like nothing could go wrong as poker reached new height after new height of popularity and success. But soon, that was all about to change. Poker suffered its darkest day in history on April 15th, 2011, when the US government seized hundreds of millions of dollars in player funds and shut down the biggest online poker sites worldwide. The incident, known as Black Friday, drastically changed the poker industry forever and led to tens of thousands of players being put out of work overnight and forced to find other sources of income.
I mean, Black Friday was like the saddest day of my life, and I kind of went into a little depression when everything you've put into your life and studied so much and worked so hard at this game that you love so much is kind of taken away. And now I'm supposed to drive 4.5 hours to Chicago to a casino and hope that there's 1-2-5 game or 1-5-10 maybe, and have to play one game at a time when I'm used to 24. It was a really rough switch, man. Many
left poker altogether and never returned. Black Friday also revealed mismanagement of funds by the leading poker site, Full Tilt Poker, and its executives, Howard Lederer and Chris Ferguson, who at the time were among the most recognizable and respected faces in poker. It took several years for players to be paid back in full the money that had been deposited in their accounts. More than a decade later, the impacts of Black Friday are still felt by poker players worldwide. Poker's popularity had been at an all-time high, and patches of online poker companies like PokerStars and Full Tilt Poker could be seen on players everywhere. It is a much different landscape today, with poker largely out of the mainstream, many fewer sponsorships, and limited televised coverage. States have slowly passed online poker legislation in the US, but online poker remains secluded to only a handful of states like Nevada, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, often with segregated player pools and limited liquidity. Here is a look back at Black Friday, the darkest day in poker history that forever altered the online poker landscape and uncovered widespread mismanagement by some of poker's biggest names. Before we go further, I want to note that there are several articles about Black Friday on PokerNews that we will be referencing throughout this video. Current and former PokerNews reporters like Matthew Parvis, Chad Holloway, John Sofin, Martin Harris, Brett Colson, Elaine Shivarlis, and Mo Nuara have done some great reporting on this topic, and a few of those stories will be linked in the description of this video. Poker hit its peak in popularity during the poker boom of the early and mid-2000s. Following Chris Moneymaker's iconic victory in the 2003 main event, poker sponsorships were going around like crazy, and ads for big online poker brands like PokerStars and Full Tilt Poker couldn't be avoided. The Full Tilt Poker roster at this time included poker heavyweights like Phil Ivey, Tom Dwan, Mike Matusow, John Jawanda, Gus Hansen, Jennifer Harmon, Eric Seidel, and Patrick Antonius. Shows like High Stakes Poker and The Big Game brought poker to households nationwide. Online poker was a major contributor to the poker boom, as a new generation of players were introduced to the game, sometimes starting with play money before spinning up a bankroll and developing a career for themselves. While poker was booming, a piece of legislation was about to question the legality of online poker in the United States. In 2006, the U.S. federal government enacted the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act, or UIGEA, which prohibited gambling businesses from, quote, knowingly accepting payments in connection with the participation of another person in a bet or wager that involves the use of the internet and that is unlawful under any federal or state law. In other words, it was technically illegal for banks to accept online gambling transactions and for gambling sites to operate at all. At the time, there were no regulated poker sites in the US because online poker wasn't legal at the federal level. The UIGEA went into full effect in 2010 and did not exclude games of skill like poker, despite lobbying efforts from the Poker Players Alliance, the PPA. It was clear there was trouble brewing in the US online poker landscape, but sites continued to operate and players continued to deposit. On April 15, 2011, US poker players awoke to see a Department of Justice emblem when they tried logging into their online poker accounts. This domain name has been seized by the FBI pursuant to an arrest warrant obtained by the United States Attorney's Office. The statement read in part, continuing that conducting, financing, managing, supervising, directing, or owning all or part of an illegal gambling business is a federal crime, and that for persons engaged in the business of betting or wagering, it is also a federal crime to knowingly accept funds in connection with the participation of another person in unlawful internet gambling. In other words, the federal government alleged that poker sites were operating illegally in the US by accepting player funds. A federal indictment filed against PokerStars, Full Tilt Poker, and Absolute Poker named 11 defendants, including PokerStars executive Isai Scheinberg, Full Tilt Poker's Raymond Bitar and Nelson Burtnick, Absolute Poker's Scott Tom and Brent Beckley, and several payment processors. As charged, these defendants concocted an elaborate criminal fraud scheme, alternately tricking some U.S. banks and effectively bribing others to ensure the continued flow of billions in illegal gambling profits, said New York U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara. Moreover, as we allege, in their zeal to circumvent gambling laws, the defendants also engaged in massive money laundering and bank fraud. Foreign firms that choose to operate in the United States are not free to flout the laws they don't like, simply because they can't bear to be parted from their profits. PokerStars quickly blocked all US players from real money games, while it took Full Tilt Poker several hours to do so before issuing the following statement. Unfortunately, as a result of this action, Full Tilt Poker has decided that it must suspend real money play in the United States until this case is resolved. However, Full Tilt Poker will continue to provide peer-to-peer online poker services outside of the United States. Full Tilt Poker is, and has always been, committed to preserving the integrity of the game and abiding by the law. PokerStars also issued a statement on the matter. As you may have heard, we have had to suspend real money poker services to people based in the US due to legal developments there. The developments are confined to the US and do not have any impact on your ability to continue using our services. Please be assured, player balances are safe. There is no cause for concern. For all customers outside the US, it is business as usual. The impacts of Black Friday were immediate. Overnight, thousands of US poker players were suddenly out of work. Countless poker players lost their sponsorships, including Prahlad Friedman, Maria Ho, and heavy metal guitarist Scott Ian of the band Anthrax. Other players impacted by Black Friday include Phil Galfond, Faraz Jaka, and Tyler Tott, all of whom spoke about Black Friday during interviews on the PokerNews Life Outside Poker podcast. On April 20th, both Full Tilt Poker and PokerStars reached an agreement with the Department of Justice that allowed them to regain the use of their .com sites to help distribute player funds. PokerStars wrote that returning U.S. players' funds is a top priority and that all PokerStars player deposits are completely safe. That wasn't the case at Full Tilt, which wrote that there remain significant practical and legal impediments to returning funds to players in the immediate future, including a lack of a U.S. payment channel and that Full Tilt Poker has no accounting of the millions of dollars of player funds that were seized by the government. By June 2011, Full Tilt still hadn't paid out tens of millions in player funds. This led a group of players to file a class action lawsuit demanding the return of players' funds and for subsequent damages, purported to be more than $150 million. The complaint listed Full Tilt CEO Raymond Bitar and many members of the Full Tilt Pro team, alleging that U.S. players are wrongfully denied access to approximately $150 million in funds they deposited in their own player accounts. But that money was gone. It was about to be revealed just how bad things were over at Full Tilt. In September 2011, 6 months after Black Friday, it was revealed that Full Tilt Poker had paid out tens of millions to its executives using player funds and did not have the money to pay back players. The U.S. Attorney's Office amended its complaint to allege that Full Tilt Poker was a Ponzi scheme that Raymond Bitar, Howard Lederer, Chris Ferguson, and Ray First used to defraud players. Full Tilt was not a legitimate poker company, but a global Ponzi scheme, the complaint read. Full Tilt insiders lined their own pockets with funds picked from the pockets of their most loyal customers, while blithely lying to both players and the public alike about the safety and security of the money deposited. The complaint alleged that as of March 2011, Full Tilt Poker owed approximately $390 million in player funds around the world, including $150 million to U.S. players. However, Full Tilt only had $60 million on deposit in its bank accounts, meaning over $300 million was still owed to players worldwide. The complaint further alleged that between April 2007 and April 2011, Bitar, Lederer, Ferguson, and First lined their own pockets with approximately $443 million in players' money. Full Tilt Poker did not protect player funds in segregated accounts, and instead used them for whatever purposes Bitar directed, including to pay him and other owners millions of dollars, the complaint stated. Because player funds were being used to cover operating expenses, Full Tilt Poker experienced an increasing shortfall between the cash it had in its bank accounts and the money it owed to players. According to the complaint, Bitar received approximately $41 million, Lederer received approximately $42 million, First received approximately $11.7 million, and Ferguson received at least $25 million and was allocated approximately $87 million. It is worth noting that Howard Lederer and Chris Ferguson were among the most popular and respected poker players at the table. Ferguson, nicknamed Jesus and always donning a trademark cowboy hat over his long hair, won the 2000 World Series of Poker main event, while Lederer was a member of the corporation that played in some of the highest stakes poker games ever documented against billionaire Andy Beal. Lederer is the brother of fellow poker player Annie Duke, who was involved in a separate scandal around the same time period involving Ultimate Bet and Absolute Poker. But that is another story for another video. The scandal would forever tarnish the legacies of the main event champion and the corporation member. The Poker Players Alliance called the allegations against Full Tilt a massive betrayal of player trust, which will cause financial hardship for thousands, if not millions, of individual poker players, none of whom are accused of doing anything wrong. Here's what bracelet winner and longtime online poker player Steve Badger had to say. Full Tilt was Howard and Chris's baby. Minimally, they betrayed themselves and those who trusted them by not keeping proper oversight over their child. Beyond that, the more they knew, the more they would have to have been active participants in the lies, misdeeds, and idiotic choices that occurred. To me, though, the worst thing now is the complete lack of explanation, which amounts to an ongoing betrayal. I suppose their attorneys have told them to shut up, but like they say on all the crime shows, if a suspect isn't explaining how they didn't do it, the logical assumption is they probably did. After a year and a half of silence, Howard Lederer spoke to PokerNews in a lengthy interview published as the 7-part series The Lederer Files in 2012. In the interview, Lederer talked about the beginnings of Full Tilt Poker, the lack of segregated accounts, Black Friday, and more. Lederer apologized to Full Tilt players, but it was a hollow apology for thousands. In 2012, PokerStars purchased Full Tilt Poker, taking hold of all Full Tilt assets and agreeing to forfeit $547 million to the US government over 3 years. But it would take several years for millions of dollars to be paid back to these Full Tilt deposits. Not knowing if they would ever see the money, many left poker and never returned. While a few online poker executives served jail time, most got away with financial penalties and what many considered to be a slap on the wrist. Howard Lederer and Chris Ferguson of Full Tilt Poker are considered pariahs in the poker community to this day, though Ferguson appeared at the 2017 World Series of Poker and wound up winning the Player of the Year distinction to the dismay of the community. In March of 2020, PokerStars founder Isai Scheinberg pled guilty to running an unlawful internet gambling business. Scheinberg avoided prison time and had to pay a fine of just $30,000, bringing the Black Friday saga to a close more than a decade later. So how about the state of online poker in the US? Black Friday provided an opportunity for state-regulated online poker sites after several rulings that the Interstate Wire Act of 1961 did not apply to online poker. Nevada and Delaware both passed legislation legalizing online poker in 2013. Other states followed suit over the next decade, including New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Michigan. But the market is just a fraction of what it used to be. A 2018 Supreme Court decision legalizing sports betting brought renewed attention on the world of online gaming, but unfortunately has also made online poker less of a priority for iGaming-inclined state lawmakers. Still, some are optimistic about the future of online poker in the 2020s. Here's what gambling industry analyst Steve Ruddock said in 2021. COVID-19 closures demonstrated there's an appetite for online poker, as activity spiked in the legal jurisdictions. Couple that with the passing of Sheldon Adelson and the recent First Circuit Court ruling on the Wire Act, there's nothing stopping states from going down the online poker and online casino road. Several states have introduced online poker bills in recent years, including New York, Colorado, Illinois, and Louisiana. Meanwhile, states with legalized online poker have combined player pools through the Multi-State Internet Gaming Agreement, or MSIGA, creating much-needed liquidity for U.S. players. Online poker will never be the same in the U.S., and Black Friday remains a cautionary reminder of the devastating consequences of skirting government regulations, ignoring warning signs, and improperly managing player funds.